Thank you so much for joining us today at Morning Coffee. I'm Maryellen Burns.
I'm Kimberly Graham.
And we are partners on a whole lot of projects. We've known each other for quite a while. She's a contributing editor to our cookbook, the ACC Senior Services Community Cookbook, The Foods We Share, The Stories We Tell. But today we're going to be talking about festas, festivals, and fairs. And I'm going to start first, if it's okay, and I'm going to be asking Kimberly too, what her favorite memory or one of her first memories of a fair. And what I remember is I grew up, and I've talked about this often, at New Helvetia, which was public housing at the end of Broadway, close to Southside Park. And at 4th of July, what they would have every year is wonderful fireworks celebrations. So everyone would come and we would get picnics. They would do kind of a potluck. You would have some food you ate yourself, some that you were willing to share, and the fireworks displays would come off. And it was just a wonderful experience. I don't remember my first real fair until sneaking into the California State Fair, which I'll tell you a lot more about later. And what I loved about sneaking into that fair was the carnival barkers who would just lure you in. And I was born in the year of the rabbit, so they would always lure me in with a bunny for your honey. How about you, Kimberly?
So I grew up in the East Bay and lived probably 20 minutes from Alameda, where there was a Crown Park amusement and carnival aspects there for us. I do remember celebrating birthdays before my 8th year, so like 7 years old. My parents would take some of the kids in the neighborhood, in addition to my younger brother and myself, and we would share a birthday. We were both born in July, about 2 weeks apart, and we would do the carnival rides and the food and go to the beach and things of that nature, but most of the time it was spent at like county fairs.
Great. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the difference is between a festa, a festival, and a fair. Kimberly mentioned earlier that she'd never heard of a festa.
That's correct.
And the only reason that I know about them is Sacramento has a very large Portuguese community. And I grew up in a large community of Portuguese, and we would go to the festa every year. But the there's basic differences. Kimberly's going to talk a little bit about what a festival is.
So a festival is an extraordinary event celebrated by a community and centering on some characteristic aspects of that community and its religion or culture. Food is with harvest time. Historically, they served as ways to commemorate or thank the gods, goddesses, or saints. They also provided entertainment, which was particularly important to local communities before the advent of mass-produced entertainment. Festivals that focus on cultural or ethnic topics also seek to inform community members of their traditions. The involvement of elders sharing stories and experiences provide unity. Attendance now is more often motivated by a desire for escapism, socialization, and camaraderie. The practice has been seen as a means of creating geographical connection, belonging, and adaptability.
And festas are always religious in origin. There are a lot of stories on how they started, mostly about Queen Isabel in Portugal. And we'll go into a lot more talk about that when we talk about the Portuguese Festa. But in Sacramento, we also have Italian festas. And again, they're always religious in nature in some way, honoring some saint. And fair. That is me. I'm sorry. So today we all attend fairs. Most of us have gone to county fairs. We go there to see animals, plants, arts, and more. Most of these exhibits are really brought to life by individuals that come in oftentimes from community groups. Again, there are state fairs, there are world fairs, which I've talked about quite a bit. There are county fairs. And one of the things is that the exhibitors actually get to share what it is that they do and they've learned with others. So some of the vendors really have always used the fair as a marketplace. And a lot of us do. Have you ever set up as a vendor at a fair or sold even jewelry or some of your art?
Not specifically myself, but I have assisted in a vendor who actually had jewelry and other items from her specific boutique shop where we were in Watsonville, and it was a great time.
Great. So fairs are actually rooted in history. They started appearing almost 2,000 years ago at the time of the Bible. And they were oftentimes, I'm going to say, really marketing in nature, not so much as the ones that were religious or celebrating the harvest. And also, there were a lot of festivals and fairs that had a lot to do with the clergy and with the church. So that's when we would start seeing churches getting together, sharing of food, sharing of community, and really connecting with community. Some people believe that the word fair actually originated in a time when a number of people would gather to a temple, and then they would celebrate with music, with dance, and they would also have extra supplies when they would come, and that's when they would start trading. Later, what we considered then was fairs became the market town. So when you travel, especially in Europe, I don't see it so much here in the United States, every town has a market day when people come. To me, in Sacramento, the farmers market that we used to have on Wednesdays on Alhambra, or even the food event that's underneath the freeway, or the antique fair that's used to be underneath the freeway and is now at the old Arco Arena, started off because of those fairs. And one of the things that the churches realized when they were doing this, they could start charging money to the merchants. So it was a way of being able to expand the church, expand business, and that's where chambers of commerces came in. So Kimberly is going to talk about them in the Americas.
So in the Americas, harmony with themselves, their tribe, and their environment. Ceremonies were used to help groups of people return to harmony, but large ceremonies were generally not used for individual healing. Varying widely from tribe to tribe, some tribes, such as the Sioux and Navajo, used a medicine wheel and a sacred hoop and would sing and dance in ceremonies that might last for days. That's similar to the sun dance. Creating a connection with spirits and the afterlife. Some of these plants and herbs used in spiritual rituals included sage, bearberry, red cedar, sweet grass, tobacco, and many others. Part of that, let me just interject here with the sun dance. They use peyote a lot, and they would form it into buttons or some edible form for which they would ingest, and that's how they would actually participate in the sun dance. Sometimes healing rituals might involve whole communities to sing, dance, paint their bodies, and sometimes use mind-altering substances to persuade the spirits to heal the sick person. Other fairs, feasts, and festivals were held to dance, sing, socialize, and honor Native peoples' cultures.
So one of the things that we noticed when we started doing some research on this is that the indigenous people always get forgotten. And so when you want to go look on the internet for the history of fairs in America, it starts with white people's fairs, especially the people who came over from Europeans. So the very, very first fair that is recorded, although it's not normally considered to be the first, not very people know about it, is the York Fair, which was founded in 1765. And that was, 11 years before the country was founded. Thomas Penn, who was the son of William Penn, granted the charter for the fair to allow to continue. It is still a continuously operating fair. That's York, Pennsylvania. So it has been going, and I've been to it. It's quite wonderful. And it continued all the way through the American Revolution, all the way through the War of 1812. The only years that it didn't operate was during the Civil War, not surprisingly, and during the pandemic of 1918, although I'm assuming that it also didn't operate during our current pandemic. I didn't check that. They really got a boost in 1807 when a man by the, my apologies, by the name of Elkanah Watson decided to exhibit 2 of his sheep under an elm tree in Pittsville, Massachusetts. And he has served as an advisor to President Washington. He was able to get other people to come to see his sheep, and everybody else thought, well, this is really fun. He had a special kind of fleece and a comb that he used to comb the fleece. And that's what's considered to be literally kind of the first one. And agricultural fairs was where the bulk of the fairs that were occurring in the United States was happening. So the first one in California, and we're going to talk about that more, was the California Agricultural Fair, which started in San Francisco in 1854. Moved around a lot before it got to Sacramento. And we might forget to mention, but 2 people were really instrumental in those early fairs, and one was Judge Peter Shield's mother, Elizabeth, who was a leading orchardist in California, does not get credited much. He started the agricultural school at UC Davis. She would create these whole rooms of fruits and vegetables and started what we now call the county exhibits, and was quite famous. And I'm going to give it back to Kimberly.
So this brings us to modern day, when we now celebrate county fairs, state fairs, world fairs, music, art, film, cultural, food, beer and wine festivals, comedy, book, harvest festivals, and festas from Italy, Portuguese, and other religious festivals. Before we go too long, we want to mention events that are coming up this week. The Obon Odori Festival at the Sacramento Buddhist Church on Riverside, not to be confused with the annual festival that's held in August. So this event occurs this weekend over both Saturday and Sunday. It's a 2-day event, and that's held July 8th and July 9th. The word Matsuri, or festival, literally means worshiping gods or ancestral spirits. Festivals were usually annual events to bless the cultivation of rice and the health of the community. To enliven the celebrations, there were performances of traditional dances and musical instruments. Obon is a Japanese Buddhist festival usually held in mid-July or August for a week, and is a time when the souls of dead ancestors are supposed to return home for 3 days. Prayers are said for anyone who has died in the previous year, as it is believed that they need more guidance to find their way. The festival has been held since the 7th century, although many of the events have changed, and it is one of the most significant and enjoyable of the Japanese festivals. It goes by a variety of names, the most popular of which is the Festival or Feast of the Dead. While it's not a public holiday, many Japanese who work in the city visit their birthplace at this time every year to clean the grave sites of their ancestors. Others clean Buddhist altars in their home, although fewer people have these. Many years ago, Obon and the holiday on January 15th were the only days servants and workers were released to return to their homes. Vegetables, fruits, and rice wine are left out for the spirits to eat. Flowers decorate the graves or altar, and incense is burned. This is the time for the living to show their respect to their ancestors, but it's not just the spirits who are given food and drink.
So that
And that's
always
very
reminds
similar.
me when we talk about Dias de los Muertos,
Yes.
Day of the Dead. We are going to be doing a morning coffee in November about those kind of funerary customs. But I used to, with my husband, get involved every year. It had to be 30, could have been almost 40 years ago, with something called Altares del Mundo, which was altars of the world. And artists would get together every year, usually for a month, with a final ceremony occurring on November 1st or November 2nd, and create an altar to someone who had passed through the year. Wonderful, wonderful altars. And if we'd had photos, we'll be showing photos of those, by the way, when we come back in November.
And is that just local and intrinsic to that area?
No, so no, they had them now all over the country, and that festival ended up becoming. It's now at the Crocker, almost, you know, it's a Mexican Latino kind of
Heritage,
celebration,
okay.
but it's really been taken over, I think, by almost everyone. And one of the stories that I like to share, and Kimberly was there, my late husband decided that he did not want a normal funeral. So what we did was, during the 2 years that he was in hospice, we had 2 pre-eulogy parties
Yes.
for him. And then he died on September 11th, a day that will live
Wow.
in infamy. But what we had in November was an altar for everyone who had passed. And so all of our friends gathered,
Mhm.
and we had altars in our home.
Mhm.
And then I've kept part of his altar up ever since. So that's just one of the many festivals. Now we're going to kind of do a little bit of an A to Z. I'll ask Kimberly, and if anybody in the audience has a question, if we had somebody here in our studio audience, we'd be asking them more about the fairs that we've gone to. I specifically want to talk about food, however, because we all have images of the food. And I was going to talk about my favorite. So when I was, my favorite then and my favorite now.
Okay.
So my favorite was cotton candy, which now I can't abide. But what I loved was that whir of the machine when they actually created the candy. And cotton candy was originally called candy floss. And it was designed by entrepreneurs who wanted to have something where they could actually kind of spin sugar. The person who ended up patenting cotton candy as a name was a dentist, which I've always found kind of, fascinating. Deep fried foods.
Yes.
I don't do those at the fair. I have to tell you, Kimberly might be different. When I go to the fair, I actually kind of eat, what I look for is the fresh corn on the cob. And I love elote, which is the Mexican corn that has mayonnaise and different kinds of spices on it.
And cheese.
I love that, and any kind of sausage that I can get. So and Sacramento used to have wonderful sausage stores. They're all gone now. KZ, Taylor's Market is one of the few places, KZ, Marant sausage, more in New York. And so those were a specialty at the California State Fair. Kimberly, your favorite foods?
So having lived in the South Bay for almost a decade, Gilroy Garlic Festival was the go-to place. I've also been as far south as Watsonville, which is where I assisted the vendor in her wares and fairs. But definitely, yeah, I'm more of the sort of adventuresome. I've had gator, I've had ostrich. I definitely do the fried foods. So specifically having fried artichoke hearts, that was actually a nice treat. Not so much into the sausage or the meaty types of things, although I do remember having a large turkey drumstick at one of the festivals that I attended. But fried bread. I actually attended a Native American festival that was held, I want to say Santa Clara even, where I used to work. And I was sold, completely sold. And I just recently visited Arizona and the Grand Canyon, and a very, probably very chic restaurant, El Tovar Hotel. They had fry bread on the menu. It was made like a flat taco. And I actually ordered that to go. We had another part of our meal. But yeah, the county fairs, the food has got to be the most central part or the most integral part for why I think people come. And they even have on the Food Network a show called Carnival Eats. And I watch it from time to time just to see what people come up with. And some of the things are like, I would never think to do that with food, but people seem to enjoy it.
And as we said earlier, agricultural fairs, so even at the state fair, I love to go see the chickens. Love the chickens. The crazier the chickens that they get. I have a thing for cows. I have a thing for pigs. So obviously the 4-H, everyone, rodeos and, music. There's just so much at them. When I travel, and I travel a lot, I try to time my travel based on, is there a fair or a festival or a music festival or a comedy festival, wine festival, you name it, wherever the city is, because that really gives you a sense of place and a taste of that place that you might not get elsewhere. I'm going to throw something at Kimberly that we hadn't really talked about before, but what comes up often in the newspapers is, does Sacramento have a signature dish? And the sense is that we don't have something. There's nothing, unlike San Francisco, which had green goddess salad, shrimp louis, you know, something that was there. We really don't. But a lot of the dishes that were indigenous to here, and I'm going to talk, we'll talk about more later, the Crayfish Festival, for example, which was in Isleton. It's just been resumed again, is something that naturally, you know, grew here. Right. And so I do like going to the ones that kind of the Mandarin Festival, the Mandarin Orange Festival up in Newcastle, the ones that do give me a sense of what's grown here. We'll talk more about the Courtland Pear Fair.
I'll have to say that I'm very surprised, given that Sacramento is the tomato and rice capital for the state.
Yeah, so Joy G is in the room with us, and she was a tomato picker, I think, at the age of 12. And this is the pedant in me, the person who likes a little academics. Tomatoes have never been in the top 10 of anything grown in Sacramento County.
I don't get that.
Processed, not even in here. It's mostly Yolo County. You know, certainly we had Campbell's soup and the others, but it's not in the number one. Number one has always been audience. We have a couple of audience members. Want to guess? Number one crop that is celebrated through festivals and fairs in Sacramento from the beginning, 1840. What's the number one crop? So we've got
is
a
it
guess
a fruit
for
or a
asparagus.
vegetable?
It is a fruit. Grapes. So Sutter literally got off of the boat, spied wild grapes, started you know, propagating them, and they have been the number one. So wine and grape festivals are the number one that have been continuously in Sacramento.
So maybe you start a new trend with the tomato and rice.
We do have a tomato festival, but we're gonna start off with our A to Z, and if somebody in the audience, we do have a couple of them. So we just wanted to go over some of the A's. I love A to Z lists, I have to say. And so I'm going to ask you to read some of the A's.
Okay. So we have, to start, an Asian Pacific Cultural Fest in Elk Grove, Asparagus Festival in Stockton, for which I missed.
I'm going to have her stop.
Okay.
So I just went to the Asparagus Festival in Stockton, which used to be the capital of asparagus. In Sacramento County, we used to have 20,000 acres of asparagus in Sacramento County. We are now down to less than 1,000 acres, a single farmer. We are hoping to be able to do a tour of his farm. But all of the asparagus that was at the Stockton Festival this time was basically imported. And they had two dishes you could get: fried asparagus.
Right.
And grilled asparagus.
And that was it.
And that was almost it in asparagus. So
wow.
I don't.
No asparagus ice cream?
Asparagus ice cream from Virginia. Okay.
Continuing, we have the Armenian Food Festival and the Ain't Necessarily Dead Festival. That's a new one for me.
That was because of El Toros del Mundo and Dias de los Muertos.
Okay.
People who were alive wanted to celebrate being alive, so they came up with the Ain't Necessarily Dead Festival.
And as Maryellen mentioned previously, the Altares del Mundo, Amador County Wine Festivals. I currently reside in Amador County, so I'll probably be attending some of those. Art festivals such as Cracker Park, and Aloha Festival in October.
And there used to be wonderful art festivals too, what was called the Sacramento Regional Arts Council that became the Sacramento Metropolitan Arts Councils. There are still lots of arts festivals all around, and we really encourage you as much as possible to
patronize
patronize them. And I do want to talk about the Armenian Food Festival, because if anybody gets an email, they'll see the name Dabagian. My husband was Armenian. The Armenians came to Sacramento in 1919 after the they fled here after the Armenian genocide, set up an Armenian church, and have been doing a pretty continuously food festival. They have moved from East Sacramento to out north, and if you can go sample the food, it is really wonderful. Lamajun, sarma, the different kinds of dishes, very different from the Greek festivals. And now we're going to go to the bees.
So we have the Sacramento Burger Battle, a Bloody Mary Festival, Beignets and Po' Boy Sandwiches Festival that occurs September 3rd, and a Brazilian Arts and Cultural Dance Festival, and it's a cultural center that's now moved.
Yeah, there's a Brazilian center in Sacramento that was on the R Street corridor, and then it moved to the Clara Center, and they've just been asked to vacate. I'm not going to get into any politics.
Okay.
But one of the reasons that we wanted to bring it up, and if you guys know more, send us an email, because the three of us, Joy especially, we'll get Virginia in there as well, who's one of our guests. We love to write books, and I think it would be wonderful for us to have a kind of a guide to Sacramento festivals, festas, and fairs, and to have people's memories. It would be something that we could produce. The one thing that I will mention, though, is the Beignets and Po' Boy Sandwiches Festival. That obviously comes out of New Orleans, and as people move to Sacramento, we have always had, I don't want to call them multicultural, from the beginning of our founding, we had, 57 different countries, more than that amount of languages. People brought their traditions, their celebrations with them, and would often celebrate. New Orleans is one of the places a lot of people came from.
So that must have been part
it's
of that
not,
exodus.
and crayfish, because we had it, crawfish there. It was kind of a natural for us to do that. And also the Lent Festival, Mardi Gras, has become very big here. All right, so the C's.
There's the Croatian American Cultural Center, Courtland Pear Fair.
Coming up.
Okay. Chalk It Up, Crawfish and Catfish, Southside Park in September. And there's a Crawfish Festival in Ileton. Okay.
Right, yeah, and that's what Virginia was just telling us. It was just a couple of weekends ago.
Okay. And of course, what has recently passed in May, the Cinco de Mayo Festival. And there's a Capitol Beer Fest March.
Right.
And where does that occur? I'm sure there are a lot of people
there are
that
so
know.
many beer festivals now. With the craft beer festivals, it's almost hard to keep up. The reason, so I'm going to go over a few of these. The Croatian Festival is wonderful. It's also on Auburn Boulevard. The Croatians and Serbians were the people especially in the 1910s, 1920s, came a little bit earlier, opened up most of the restaurants in Sacramento. So Rosemont Grill is one of them. Almost every restaurant that, they didn't serve Croatian food, they served kind of all-American food. It's like the Greek diner, today. Okay. But they opened Tadich Grill in San Francisco, which is considered the oldest restaurant in California. They were fishermen, so they were almost always fish and grill restaurants, and we have a long tradition. So I really suggest that you go there.
Did they do much with bakeries?
I don't, Kimberly asked about bakeries, and I don't remember that much, to be really honest. I haven't been one to a while. The Courtland Pear Fair is coming up on July 30. It is, I don't remember what year this is, but what I love about the Courtland Pear Fair, the Courtland Pear Fair was able to grandfather in their vendors. So unlike the modern fair of today, what I don't like about them, health departments have gotten in. You have to have an enclosed space. You have to have a health certificate. Most professionals, so the people who go to all the county fairs and state fairs, go from fair to fair. There's some saying, there's a television show now on fairs in Texas where people make millions of dollars in 14 days, literally at a single fair. So they've become commercial. Courtland still has the PTA, the ladies groups, the fire department, the schools producing the the food, and the music is also homespun.
Okay.
So we really suggest that you go there. I think it's from 9 to 3. It's $10 to park your car, and then everyone can go to it. And we have an artist in the room that participates in Chalk It Up, which is Labor Day weekend every year. And what Chalk It Up is wonderful. It started off with a group of artists that said, what if we just took Fremont Park, right? Fremont Park, and had artists take a square. Businesses could buy a square, and then artists would do it, and it's all done in chalk. So it's meant to be ephemeral, and if you've never been there, it's wonderful. You can hire Joy G to do a square for you this year in September. We'll tell you how to get a hold of her. And then we're going to talk just a little bit about the California State Fair. So, and I won't go through the long history, but the California State Fair, as we said, started here in 1854, or started in San Francisco, moved a lot. It was in an agricultural area at the fair, at the Capitol, which was at 15th Street,
L,
between
or
L
M?
and what is that, and wherever Jerry Brown was.
Okay.
That's where it was. Then it moved over. There was a race area in what I believe we now called Boulevard Park. So that's where the races would go. And Mark Twain, who, although he's uncredited, he never got a byline for it. He loved the races. He loved to bet on the ponies. And so he would come up to report on them. There's no proof that he ever stayed overnight, but he'd at least come up, and he'd work for the Sacramento Union, and he would end up reporting basically
On the racetrack?
on the racetrack. Eventually, it outgrew its space, and it moved in 1909 to my favorite place. And I'm sure that Virginia's going to remember this. We're all old enough. It was at the fairgrounds on Stockton Boulevard and Broadway.
Wow.
And a wonderful facility with agricultural business exhibits. What was special for us as kids is they always had a hole out near the racetrack so that you could tunnel under, because it was even pricey for kids. And so we would be able to go. I lived in the neighborhood. We could literally go every day. Merlino's Orange Freeze was across the way. And there was a restaurant that was called Dunlap's that was a very exclusive high-end restaurant owned by George Dunlap, the only really famous black restaurant at the time, but only served a white clientele. But at the state fair, starting in 1917, he would run a cafeteria, and it was the one place that everyone could really enjoy his food. The best hamburgers that I remember, they were just really wonderful. They would grill them and smash the original smash burger with grilled onions.
Oh, wow.
Tacos that were quite incredible. Jim Boy's Tacos came out in the 1950s. And then the last story that I want to share is my brothers and I were involved before it moved to Cal Expo in something called Teenage Fair. And they decided that they needed to get money from teenagers. So you had to pay $4 to get in, or $5 to the fair. And it was an additional $4 to get into the Teenage Fair. And a friend of ours, who was the name Harry Schwartzbaum, ran it. And so he hired my brothers, who were, I think, 14 and 17, to work. I was a little bit younger, so we could actually work at the fair. And he had, remember, Dobie Gray was the big person at the time. But my favorite story is that he had a son by the name of Eric, who was 12 years old, that he put in charge of the Miss Teenage Fair contest. And even though there were much more talented and beautiful and curvaceous women, he had his eye on Barbie Benton.
Oh, wow.
Who I think was 15 or 16 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to say. And she was crowned the first and only Miss Teenage Fair, because it didn't continue years later. And the story is because my brother Scott, who was running one of the concessions, had a game that you could play that you threw something into the mouth that had seeds in it, and he would let you have as many bags as you needed to succeed, and then you would win a free 6-pack of Barley's soda, which was a soda place that we had, and they went bankrupt the next year. So that's my memories. Do you have any memories, Kimberly? Did you ever go to the state fair?
I remember I have vague memories of being at Cal Expo as a kid because a childhood friend and classmate, that's what they did every Sacramento. She had family here. And I just remember it being a long, hot drive and getting there. It was just so much to take in when you're like 7 or 8 years old and you're just, everything is distracting. And that's pretty much all I remember there. I don't remember the food. I don't remember much other than it being hot. Mm-hmm.
So this is Joyce talking about her mother. We don't have a mic for her.
We live up Broadway on Yale Street.
Okay.
And the State Fair is there. So there's a picture of me holding a light bulb pretending it's an ice cream. So for standing in front of the flamingos. But the State Fair was the event for the year.
Yeah.
And the State Fair is still going on. It changed from September, which I thought it was more successful, to July when it's really hot.
Right.
It's now a State Fair and food festival.
Okay.
Joy and I volunteer. Well, Joy has actually worked at the fair doing art exhibits and other kinds of exhibits. So we've been very involved in the fair itself. I have stopped going. And I do have two stories of the new location. The first thing is I was about 18 or 19, and I would go to the fair and I would get on to the tilt-a-whirl. Well, I was 16 is when I started. And I would get on, and the guys, the carnies, would let me ride longer. And I would hit my head on the back.
Oh, my goodness.
And 3 years running, I got a concussion. And it took me till I was like the fourth concussion that I thought, I can just get off the tilt-a-whirl, which is now a metaphor that I use when I take on too much. I have to say that. And then the last one is that I was working at Music Circus the summer between graduation, and everybody would always take me to the State Fair on my birthday because it was September 2nd. And a group of friends took me to the fair, and we were on the Swan going across the lake when I must have passed out, because all I know is 2 weeks later I woke up.
Oh my goodness.
And I had mononucleosis because they made us share a cup at Music Circus, and 27 of us didn't make it through Music Circus.
Yeah.
But I lost 30 pounds, so it was the happiest 2 weeks of my life. And Joy has added, Virginia, did you want to add anything about the State Fair?
Every summer, we lived in the Delta Islands, and every summer, every summer my aunt would invite us over. She lived off of Stockton Boulevard. So we would take the bus. She would pack a bento lunch. In case you don't know, one of those, she'd make rice balls and food for us. Take the bus, and she allowed us to spend all day. I love the county exhibits, were always my favorite. I don't think they do. It has the same appeal that it does at the State Fair. In fact, I personally do not like the current location. I feel it's too much brick and mortar. But my aunt would find a place, sit under a tree in the shade, and we would meet her for lunch, and then she'd let us go. And then on the way home, we would get a Merlinos. So we did that for like 3 or 4 summers. It was our treat, from a break from my parents, but she would invite my brother and I to stay with them for like a week just so we could go to the State Fair.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Merlinos was the original orange freeze. There's still one, Hagen, I think, has them, that is still making them, that's out on Walnut. The Merlinos company's still around, but they don't use fresh orange juice.
Don't they serve it at Music Circus?
Yes, and they serve it at Music Circus. Right.
River Cats game too, I think.
Right, and at the River Cats. So we are up to the D's. We're going to get through here.
So, Dixieland Jazz Jubilee, the Dixon Lamb Festival. I've attended that, and it's great.
Okay.
Dixon's 12th Annual Brewski Fest, October 14th.
Okay, so I want to just briefly talk about the Dixieland Jazz Jubilee. It is no longer.
Yeah, I guess that.
Yeah, so we'll get another mic on Virginia. No, but the Dixieland Jazz Jubilee was just wonderful. It would be held in Old Sacramento and in other venues. They would have bands come from all over the world. And again, it was about the entertainment. It was not about the food. It wasn't about the vendors. But tastes change, and so they opened it up to be just a more general kind of blues and whatever festival. And it's also, there are certain people that put on fairs and festivals that keep it going.
My neighbor was the organist. She played at the Jazz Jubilee. She was one of the. She also played Monterey.
Right.
But my next door neighbor was a major part of that.
Right. So a call out to a mutual friend of ours, Laura Martin, who did the PR for that for forever. You went to the Dixon Lamb
Yes.
Festival.
I love it. Well, so like you and the 4-H agriculture aspect, the chickens and the cows and all that, that's fascinating to me, but I'm more of the sheep and goats person.
Good.
And the lambs.
And the lambs. Good. Ease.
Earth Day, April 22nd. I can't say enough about that. We actually should have more Earth Days and shouldn't just be relegated to April.
Right.
Egyptian Festival in Roseville, held in October.
Right. And one of the reasons that I brought up the Egyptian Festival is there is a festival for every culture. We're not able to list them all today, but if you know of any, again, you can send an email. I have to remember our email. If you can call or get accsv.org, I'm sure that there's an email that you can do or a phone number. I have one for ACC, but it's long. It's accommunitycookbook@gmail.com. Will also get to us. So do you want to talk any more about Earth Day?
So having not just UC Davis.
Not UC Davis.
Not just UC Davis. Yeah. But it's the contribution and the participation where pretty much a lot of people come together to help clean up the planet. And that's why I said it shouldn't just be relegated to April and that one day. I've been doing this since I can remember. I used to watch a program called The Big Blue Marble. And it was mostly about kids and, taking care of the planet and what you can do and contribute and participate in reducing the overall effects that we're now experiencing that some people still don't admit to, but it's real. So for that, I don't know, because I grew up and it wasn't coastal, but it was enough, like in Alameda, we had the beaches. But there's so much erosion, they were actually having to truck sand in to extend the beaches. Now when you go there, there's really just barely enough room to walk around, and it's now kind of kept to a little bit of a pit. So all of our coastlines are constantly eroding, and we're losing that beauty that California had, which is why we have a lot of immigrants in this particular state. Just that coastline appeal. Keeping the waters blue. I love what they've done with Tahoe, that whole campaign. And I haven't been to Tahoe in a while, but the last time I saw it, it's pristine. It's just absolutely spectacular.
Well,
so
the water in the oceans are rising. So
yes, we're losing a lot of, and then the natural evaporation process. Yeah.
Good. And I'm going to ask Kimberly to talk a little bit more about the Festa do Espírito Santo, the Portuguese festa.
So it's the Freeport Clarksburg Portuguese Festa, and as she just recently mentioned, it's Festa de Espírito Santo. It's a Portuguese festa. 6676 Pocket Road is the location. So a little bit of history. Portuguese immigrants played a significant role in the development of Sacramento, especially in the early 20th century. They primarily settled in the neighborhoods of Little Portugal, Land Park, and Pocket Greenhaven. I actually lived there. In the early 1900s, many Portuguese immigrants arrived in Sacramento to work in the agricultural industry, particularly in the cultivation of fruits and vegetables. They also worked as fishermen and dairy farmers. As the numbers grew, they established through clubs, churches, and other institutions to preserve their culture and traditions. One notable Portuguese institution in Sacramento is the Portuguese Holy Ghost Society, which was established in 1914. It is a cultural and social organization that hosts the annual Festas do Espírito Santo, a religious festival that celebrates the Holy Spirit, includes a parade, traditional food, music, and dancing, usually held about the third weekend in September or occasionally in May. Today, the Portuguese community continues to celebrate its heritage through cultural events, traditional food, and community organizations. Few restaurants serve Portuguese food beyond beans in places like Tony's in Walnut Grove or linguiça and eggs in some breakfast places. Corti Brothers does offer a bacalhau, salt cod, and Portuguese sweetbread occasionally. That would be mogladesh. Other festivals include the Festival of the Pig.
Good. And so the first time that I went to a festa was my best friends in high school were Portuguese, and they would go to the festival each year. And I loved the food that that they made. The food was really quite wonderful. I have to say.
Very flavorful.
Later, I met Lorraine D'Alessandro. She was the not a co-owner, but she was the hostess at my favorite Italian restaurant, Americo's. And her husband, Americo, started that restaurant. Lorraine had started off as one of the few women caterers. She worked at the top of the mark, and for the Elks, 1,000 meals literally a day. And she also hired all of my friends at Lorraine's Ice Cream, which was on 28th and J Street. So I used to spend a lot of time there as well. She was the one, along with her son, who really started the Portuguese Historical Society. They have now saved thousands of photos, stories, documents. You can probably find every Portuguese family documented in a way that I haven't seen kind of any place else. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Farm to Fork Festival. The Farm to Fork Festival is relatively new. We started it in 2012. The concept is not. It's how we cooked for forever. It's what every festival was in Sacramento. Many of you might know it from its reputation as the bridge dinner, which cost, I think, well over $200 a person. It's a lottery. You have to call in. If you're lucky enough, you'll be able to get in. They have some of the top chefs do it. They have a festival that also runs, it's a one-day festival on the Capitol Mall. And it's really expanded as well, where they have hundreds of vendors. For the first time, they're starting to acknowledge where they are, which is the West End. And so they have a couple of Black chefs, I'm sorry for not remembering their names, that have really tried to recreate the Black experience in the West End. And now they're starting to look at the Japanese and the Chinese and the Hispanic view to make sure that they're represented in the Farm to Fork Festival. The reason that I laugh about it is the first use of farm to table, not farm to fork, was in 1915. David Lubin, who those of you who are old enough to remember Weinstock's Lubin, created the concept because they were starting to realize that the farms couldn't get their vegetables and fruits to market because they didn't have the roads to do it. So they created what is now called a CSA, Consumer Supported Agriculture. You could, through the mails, order something and they would send it to you. And it was called Farm to Table. It would come in a box. And that's how our highway system and a lot of our rural roads really started. So they want to make you think it's all new.
It's not.
It's all been done before.
Wow.
Great. And we kind of went over the Filipino Family Festival in Elk Grove. Geez, we're up to the G's now.
So we have the Greek Food Festival that occurs in October. The Grape Escape Rayleigh's Market puts that on?
Yeah.
Okay. And the Grilled Cheese Festival in Southside Park. I may actually attend that.
So the Greek Food Festival is in the Atlantic Center, beautiful new facility. It's also where Taste of Sacramento is, so it's on Alhambra. Been going for forever. What I love about them is a lot of these festivals put out cookbooks That's true, the Pacific Rim and whatever, so I collect those cookbooks. So you not only get to taste the food, but you can often buy a cookbook. The reason I brought up Grape Escape Celebration of Wines, which we haven't talked about,
Okay.
a lot of the grape festivals and whatevers are either put on by the producers themselves or the associations to sell it. The Sacramento Bee did Celebration of Wines and brought the White Zin Festival to you. And so it is that kind of corporate together versus a community saying we want to celebrate our culture. So that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Interesting.
And then H for the Harvest Festival. I was hoping Honey Lum could be here as well to represent the Locke Foundation and the Harvest Festival. The Harvest Festival is one of our newest festivals. They had it last year. It's in October in Old Sacramento. It's a multicultural festival. And what's wonderful is it brings in every culture. So it's more about dance and music. They do have food vendors, but the food vendors don't necessarily reflect the culture of the people who are dancing and singing.
Interesting.
Okay, eyes.
Italian Cultural Society's annual Festa Italiana.
And if you can think of other eyes, we'd appreciate it. My favorite one, again, is the Italian festival that's up in Sutter Creek.
We have the Italian picnic grounds.
The Italian picnic grounds up. And so that's the other thing is it's not just Sacramento, but if you go off into the other communities
counties
and the
communities,
counties,
right.
there's always something to be able to do it. And then the Jays.
The Jewish Food Festival and Fair. The Japanese Bazaar, Sacramento Buddhist Church. Riverside. Jackson Art and Wine Festival.
Good. So I wanted to bring up the Jewish Food Festival because it's also been going for many, many years. A lot of the festivals had to kind of close during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, I think you had to order your food, kind of separately. But one of the reasons that they started was, and we can have whole talks on assimilation, but they wanted people to get some sense of the culture and the food, and they figured the perfect bagel was a great way of being able to do it. And then the Japanese Bazaar, Joy lived on Yale Street, and so we're really mad at her because she moved. That means we can no longer park in her driveway and walk over to it. But that was the festival that really introduced me to Japanese food. I was 10. My mother and father were best friends with George Okino, who was a produce manager at Cordy Brothers, and his wife. And we would go over for New Year's every year, but they also made the best tempura. And they're the ones who taught me how to make inari sushi. And is it onigiri?
Onigiri, you're talking about that people call footballs?
Right, the footballs. Right. And so it's something that I like going to literally every year. And it is the oldest Japanese food festival in the country. I think it's going on year number 78.
Okay. Can I make a comment?
Yes.
They haven't done the bazaar in the last several years.
Oh, they haven't done the bazaar.
They haven't done anything. It was all pre-order, or you could
Oh.
get a rental. So I'm happy to announce that we will be doing a one-day food festival at the Buddhist Church on August 12th.
Can you repeat that again,
August
Virginia?
12th will be a one-day food festival at the
Wonderful.
Sacramento Buddhist Church. There will be some activities, games outside, and entertainment. They will be selling teriyaki beef sandwiches, I think. They're going to have the tempura. They will have a couple of sushis. So anyway, I think it's supposed to end early. I think it's going to be like 11 to 7, but the information will be coming out. But we are finally going to be able to do
Wonderful.
one day.
Thank you. I'm so glad you
please
came
come.
today to share that with us.
Yale Street down the street.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Parking is a problem for us, but we're telling people.
It's well worth walking to. I have to tell you, I can walk it from my house in 22 minutes. I do it all the time.
We did have parking underneath the freeway, and we would use ACC rides to.
Okay. So that was one of the things we're suggesting is that it's possible that ACC rides will be able to figure out a mechanism for getting us there. All right, so we're up to the L's. We're going to get through this.
So we skipped the my favorite letter of the alphabet. 'Cause there's nothing there.
Can anybody think of a festival that started with a K? I could not.
I can't either. it's probably unknown to us at this time.
There was a Korean one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Our apologies. Our apologies. Yes.
My daughter-in-law's
We love this lively interchange. So you're right, Korean festivals, I should have looked. There's the Locke Asian Pacific Festival. Locke is doing a tremendous job twice a year now with having festivals that really celebrate the culture of the Chinese community. And we're up to the M's.
There's the Mid-Autumn Moon Festival and Night Market, Mexican Independence Day in September, a Mobile Food Festival, and Mediterranean Food and Music Festival.
So again, there's a festival for almost everything. I wanted to mention the mobile food festivals. Those are food trucks, what we used to call food trucks. And it's interesting because Sacramento's history is, we have a little bit less street food in Sacramento than a lot of cities had. We had tamales and stuff earlier, and vendors would come with their carts and out, but not as much. So this mobile cart and mobile truck festivals are kind of the newest thing on the block.
And where do they normally do that? Because
So there's one, well, some of them, they call them festivals, but Tahoe Park has one every month. And, you know, and there's
How
a
many
Sac Mo
vendors?
festival.
Okay.
Sometimes 20,
Wow. Yeah.
you know, festivals. And so that they'll, you know, get people together. Right, second Saturdays and stuff, which are art festivals.
Okay. So
Good.
obviously, no N that we can think of.
Oh, there. Trust me, there were plenty for N. I just
ran out of.
ran
Okay.
out of nectarines. There has to be a
Got
festival
it.
for nectarines.
Got it. So now we're at O, the Obon Odori Festival,
Right,
Oktoberfest, which is mostly beer,
right.
Old School Days in Old Sac.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about Oktoberfest. So Sacramento was very German, Swiss, Austrian. We had the Turnverein. They started Oktoberfest fairly early, but the largest Oktoberfest outside of Munich, Germany, up until when it closed in the 1960s, I think, was Scheidel's Bavaria on Fulton Avenue.
You're kidding.
And they would put fake snow on the roof so that you could actually ski down. 30,000 people a year
Wow.
attended that Oktoberfest. And Oktoberfest is still celebrated in Sacramento and on the you know, the streets. Every holiday. I mean, we didn't talk about St. Patrick's Day and other
Right.
stuff. And then the Old School Days, I loved it. Old School Days. Old Sacramento used to have lots of festivals, Pacific Rim and others. And Old School Days was where you could go visit not only the school, but get a sense of what it was like to go to school in the 1870s.
Really? So they set up kind of like a village type?
Yeah, it would be, yeah, there's, you know, it would
stage
be a village
something?
in stages, and you would
Okay.
understand what schooling was like and actually take some of the lessons.
That's fascinating. I would love to see that.
Good.
Pacific Rim Festival, the Pure Food Festival, the Peach Festival, Port Wine and Chocolate at the Sugar Mill.
Right. Now, I really miss the Pacific Rim Festival. It was one of the best festivals that Old Sacramento ever had. Old Sacramento has decided that one of the reasons they're not doing festivals anymore is they're all cobblestone streets. It was too costly to bring in sawdust for the ranch days and the others. Pacific Rim just got to be harder and harder. But what was wonderful about Pacific Rim in Virginia, am I right? It ran for a couple of days. It was really represented the entire AAPI, you know, community. And so again, dance, culture, vendors, storytelling. We didn't talk about Storytelling Festival. All of that was that. I wish they would bring it back. And the Pure Food Festival I brought up because Sacramento was home to, in 1849, long before the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act of the feds, Sacramento enacted the first pure food law about adulteration in food.
Wow.
And we would host these kind of traveling pure food festivals that tried to promote kind of vegetarianism and veganism, but it was really about not adulterating, eating what is now, organic, not using chemicals. And so again, when we start looking at the organic food movement, it really started in Sacramento. And we were the leader in that, by the way. And one of the leaders was CK, I hope if I got my McClatchy, the Sacramento Bee.
Oh, wow.
And then they split because the Sacramento Bee later wanted to get advertisement. The Sacramento Union was willing to advertise them for free. And so the Bee kind of stopped for a long time and started their own series of festivals instead.
Interesting. So at R, the Rhythm and Blues Festival, which probably would be one of my favorites, and the Romanian Festival.
And there are, one of the things that I found interesting is historically there were not a lot of festivals that were Black oriented, not really until the Banana Festival that Sonager Truth did, now the Rhythm and Blues Festivals. Black music, for whatever reason, it wasn't something that was big in Sacramento until literally, I'm going to think, the last 20 years. And I would love for somebody to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm pretty darn close. Okay, S.
So, S. Sacramento Asian Pacific Film Festival. The Seafood and Soul Festival in Elk Grove at Strauss Island. Strauss Music Festival in Elk Grove in September. Sac State World Culture Festival in August. Safari on the River, September. And the Scandinavian Festival.
So the Sacramento Asian Pacific Film Festival, and we should talk about others, was a wonderful. Virginia, do you know if this was like the first year Jason Jong, I think, helped to produce it? But we are really starting to get a lot of film festivals. The Jewish Film Festival, the Sacramento Food Festival, the Asian Pacific is to honor the achievements of those people who both locally and around the world, so that we get a stronger sense of cultural awareness. So where I always saw fairs as being kind of commercial, they're getting to me to be a little bit less commercial and more of a way of really sharing culture and trying to create community and unity. And the other reason for the Safari on the River Festival, like really celebrating wildlife. So there's a festival for everything.
An excuse.
And again, we forget that there's a strong Dutch community down in Rio Vista, Scandinavian community, Russian community. So whenever a community gets together to do a festival, it's really to have people recognize their contributions to Sacramento life. Yes, Virginia.
Did we mention Juneteenth as a festival?
Oh, thank you. I am so sorry.
Missed it.
Under Jay's Juneteenth. Right, and Juneteenth, which is now very important, which is now a national, holiday, and is really
in
celebrated.
Most states. Let's put it that way.
States. It's a federal holiday. Pardon?
It's a federal holiday.
It is
a
now.
federal
Yes.
holiday. It's a federal holiday.
It is now. Yes.
Yeah. And for those people that don't know, Juneteenth, it took 2 years for Texas to let the people that were enslaved in Texas know that they were then a free people. And so we celebrate the
Day of Independence.
Day of Independence or liberation for them. Okay, teas.
Tomato Festival, and a taste of Elk Grove, a taste of Sacramento, and a taste of Davis.
Every city now has a taste of where you can get a long. I just went to the Taste of East Sacramento event, which was also, now there are some venues that all events are at. Where the Hellenics, the Greek churches, they lend their hall to almost anyone for doing a food festival. It's where the Greek food festival is. It's where the Armenian food festival is usually held. The Taste of East Sacramento. And that's usually where they invite bakers and butchers and restaurants to come in and wineries. And you pay money, and then the money goes to some, for some benefit.
Okay.
Some nonprofit. They're also where the most crab feeds. And I didn't put crab feeds in festivals, but there isn't a Catholic church around that doesn't have some kind
Some
of
type
a
of-
thing.
yeah.
And then the other reason for bringing the tomato festival is we had a tomato festival, very short-lived. Rice was the woman who did it, and it was at the town and country village in the beginning, and it just kind of lost its impetus. And part of the reason is that the tomato, for all we call ourselves Sac a tomato, has never played a really major role in Sacramento history.
Still don't get that. I'm sorry. Just don't get that.
And now we're almost to the end. The W's.
West Coast Brew Fest, Wine, Beer, and Food Festival in Galt, Wine and Chocolate in Lodi.
So wine festivals galore. And Kimberly lives up in Amador where they have a lot of festivals. I used to be involved in the Lodi festivals. There's a wine festivals in Clarksburg. Wine grapes are actually, when I said grapes, that was a little bit of a fallacy. Wine grapes has been the #1 crop since 1840 in
Wow.
Sacramento County, turned into wine. So all kinds of wine festivals that really celebrate the grape and give an opportunity for the different wineries to be able to showcase their wares. And that's now getting to be true of brew fests as well. Beer in
craft
Sacramento
beer,
is
yes.
starting to develop. We finally have passed a law that we have some distilleries that are in Sacramento.
Okay.
So there's going to be some whiskey festivals.
So gaining traction.
So it's really gaining
yeah.
traction.
Okay. Vegan Food Festival in Southside Park.
So I just wanted to say again, there's a large vegan, vegetarian community, plant-based. They'll have different names. But I wanted to draw attention to Southside Park because Joy and I, that's where we grew up when we were kids. It used to be double the size that it is. But it's another place where families can really get together. They have, and they celebrate every kind of culture and every kind of food at the park. So if you want to go on almost any weekend, there's going to be something that's going on. And if you just feel like visiting the, I call it the Japanese Presbyterian Church or the Guadalupe, you can always get street people selling corn, caramel corn, helados, tamales, and one of their vendor carts every week. So it might not be a festival, but you're going to get the best food in Southside Park.
And last but not least, the Zinfest Wine Festival.
And I left that one for least because for those of you who ever had white Zin, Gloria Burt and I are the reason that you have it today. We have to tell you, we're not proud of this moment because it's not the best wine in the world. But Story, Sobon, and some other vintners up in Amador County were trying with a new grape, which was called White Zinfandel. And so we convinced the Sacramento Bee to do a celebration of wines. Celebration of wines was just White Zin. Sutter Homes actually started in Napa. I love Sutter Homes.
Really?
White Zin, it's quite wonderful. But one of the reasons that I brought it up is, one, it's a Z, is that Sacramento has not only been home to more festivals than almost any place. And when we mean Sacramento, we're talking about a 60-mile radius out. But we've also are the marketing spot for new products. And so lots of foods that from all across the country, from frozen foods or whatever, are brought to Sacramento as a test market and are often introduced at these food festivals. And one thing, I'm going to backtrack and then I'm going to open it up and we're going to end. We didn't really talk about the seafood festivals. One of the things that the Farm to Fork has is when you go, there are oysters, which has a long history in Sacramento. Tons of oysters that are out. Oysters are often served at a lot of these events. Clams and others, almost all supplied by one supplier for the whole coast of Sacramento, Pacific Seafood. Okay. But when I was a kid growing up, again, Joy and I grew up in Southside Parks. You would walk down 10th Street, the Japanese-Chinese area, and then south of Broadway. And there were all kinds of places where you could get fresh fish and seafood for home use.
So were there actual fishmongers who
There
would
were
fish in
fishmongers.
the? Okay.
And also, you could fish at Southside Park.
You're kidding.
So
I
they
caught
would.
my first and only fish. It jumped out of my brother gave me the lid fell off. It fell into the gutter. I couldn't pick it up.
Yeah, so Joy was just on. She caught her very first fish there. But it was really wonderful. And so what we would have is we would have fish fries
Ooh,
in
yes.
Southside Park so that you could actually catch the fish and do
And then
it.
just fry it.
So we're talking about festivals, festas, and fairs, but it's really about celebration.
Right.
So I'm going to wrap up unless anybody else has it. Kimberly can put in some words. You can have a festival in your front yard if you want.
Pretty much anywhere and with anything.
Right, Mahjong was also a feature
In
as well.
Summers,
Yeah.
they would have mahjong.
So is there anything you wanted to add before we put in a little plug for our cookbook?
Patronize your local festivals, not just for the community, but the support to keep them going and to keep them alive. It's really tragic when someone has to close their doors or shutter a festival and, honor of the people who are actually the reason for the celebration.
Right. And if you want to let us know about some, he's not going to be happy. But I do know the email for Ted Fong, tfong@accsv.org. He will make sure that Kimberly and I get it. Would be a way, because we know that there are going to be some. If you have stories, eventually we want to set up, when we do morning coffee, we're going to ask
do more
if we can
interviews.
have, we're not going to do August. We'll have our next one in September. And we'll talk about the cookbook just a little before we wrap up. But we hope to have little story sessions at the
Yes.
end of it so that we can record your story, hear your story, whatever it's about, or set up time for a longer way of collecting the stories for later. And then our last plug is Kimberly and I and a whole host of others. Joy was on the committee as well. Virginia doesn't realize it, but a lot of people credited her with why they submitted a recipe, so she must have said something. We've received recipes from contributors all throughout the Delta, Walnut Grove, Ileton, Clarksburg, South Sacramento from here, a lot of the instructors. And we put it into a cookbook that is the ACC Community Cookbook, The Foods We Share, The Stories We Tell. Well over close to 200 recipes. The stories are what make it, to me, so exceptional.
I agree.
It's the best part of it. You can pre-order the cookbook through July 31st. It's going to be $25, but it'll be 20% discount. So you can pre-order them for only $20. And that you can do by looking at, it must be www.accsv.org/cookbook/. So that's accsv.org/cookbook/. And Kimberly has been really instrumental. It is to our wonderful designer, Vanessa Wong Perez, is doing
Beautiful
an incredible
jacket.
job on it. You're going to be really proud to have that. And we'll be doing some proofreading. We hope to have it out by August 15th, September 1st at the latest. So that's mine. You get to wrap it up.
Great find. I do. Well, I kind of wish we had beignets for this to wrap it up. But thank you for joining us today. We so much appreciate you as our audience and our viewers, and we look forward to future events.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Till next time. Thank you, Virginia, Joy, and those of you at home.